What does it take to create real, lasting change with people, with animals, and with organisations, particularly in places where presence isn't usually prioritised? And what does that tangibly look like?
A course, a structure that will help to, in their words, assess a person's intent. So I went, "Oh, you mean you want me to teach people to mind read?" And they went, "Well, we can't put it like that in the paper."
Welcome to the Frequency Files. Thanks for joining us as we explore the vibrations, forms, and creations and mechanisms behind them that inform the nature of existence. So, Maya, I would love to know more about your practice, your processes that you use when you're working with individuals and groups. I know that you worked on me a few weeks ago, and that was a really fascinating experience. So, if you could you take us through a little bit of your process?
Yes, I think the best way for me to answer that question or to describe this or discuss this is just to reiterate that I have certain skills that came about at a very young age and then were amplified because I had a near death experience followed by an out of body experience at the age of 9. And I was out of my body for 3 Earth days. And um, over that period of 3 Earth days, I had the usual near death experiences, plus I went back into 3 lifetimes where I had developed a very high level of intuitive, people centered skills. We can call it that. So when I came out of this out of body, what they would call a coma, I suppose, um, I was not the same being. My brain was not the same brain. My energy body was not the same energy body that went into that near death experience. I came out different, more full, more consciously aware of, I'm going to call it the structures of the universe and the structures of um, what we would call human energy anatomy now, in a way that I could not and would not have been able to explain at that age, at 9. And at the time, the dominant, I'm going to call it symptom, the dominant symptom of these skills was my ability to absolutely feel through people.
Mm.
Okay. And I think that word feel through is important because although I could see through in my mind's eye, so if I was presented with somebody, I could see a disruption in their field or in their body that wasn't running at its optimal capacity. And I learnt over time that specific patterns and colors in the body meant specific types of illnesses or specific disorders. That's the first piece. But the feeling through was a whole other experience. So I have the capacity to mirror that which is in front of me in a human or animal or plant form, and thereby translate the sensations in my own field and my own body from that mirroring. And that gives me the information that allows me to understand what's happening with that individual. Because we are frequency and we are light. And where
Yeah.
there is density in the field, or there is a discordant sound, something that isn't, because I hear inaudible sound as well. So if I scan through a body, and that, like, if you tap on a crystal glass, it goes ding.
Yeah.
Okay. But if the glass is cracked, it doesn't. It goes boom. right? So you can imagine that I have this capacity to hear and see and feel that which is going on with the person or group in front of me. And in addition, I have the capacity to be with the higher aspects of myself, which then mirror the higher aspects of whoever I'm working with or whatever I'm working with. And in addition, I have gathered over the years and over the centuries and over millennium, a huge number of out-of-body guides that have probably traveled with me through a number of different lifetimes over and over again. So I have a very skilled bunch of individual guides and a very skilled bunch of collectives that work with me depending on what's in front of me. Okay, so that gives you the context for, so what is it that Maya is, or how does she experience the world in a way that allows her to be helpful to others? I think that that's how I'd like to rephrase that how do you work question. Okay, right. So with that in mind, not only do I have the capacity to resolve or help resolve discordance within the mind, body, emotion, spirit matrix that we are, I also have the capacity to enhance certain things. So we have the capacity to, and I say we because it is me and the collectives that I work with, we have the capacity to remove, resolve, dissolve, complete certain things that are incomplete in people. That for me is what karma is. It is simply a conversation in your field or in your psyche or in your emotions that has not been completed. And my job is to support that individual or that plant or that animal to complete the conversation, resolve it, de-traumatize it, if you like, unshock it, get the energy field moving again, and then bring in a more supportive, helpful energy that is often in contrast to what is currently there, or is of a pure, let's say we were talking about that glass note, ping, bringing in an inaudible, pure frequency that is utterly balanced. And that balance in nature actually resolves discordance in the field and in sound. It's just physics, actually. It's physics. Okay. So that is actually what I do. And what I am, and as I work with people, the other thing that happens is I get a story. I get told their story. Sometimes it's direct. It's very direct, like, oh, your father was struggling with drugs at this point, and this is what happened then, and this is what happened then, and this is then the shape that your aura took on to cope with that, or your emotions. Sometimes it's very direct, and other times, if we're dealing with what some people would call a karmic issue, in other words, an incompleted, unfinished conversation or unfinished, incompleted contract with your soul to inform your soul of a particular way of being in the world, what happens then is that I have the capacity with my invisible friends, I just call them the invisibles, to create a gestalt or the equivalent of a personal myth, a personal fairy tale that tells the story. And as we're expressing the story, the truth of those events begins to unravel and shift. And in that shifting, the story is completed, and then the individual conversations over lifetimes or over this lifetime complete, and that creates a space for your soul and higher level energies to come in and fill the gaps. And in that filling of the gaps with a more universally balanced energy, that issue over sometimes immediately, but definitely over 5 days to 3 weeks, just resolves. Okay. And often so people will often come to me with a particularly sticky issue. And the sticky issue could be that they reach a certain level of progression in their career and then they get fired every single time. And they could be 55 and might have been fired 10 times in the same role. Okay. And I will look at that and I will say, okay. And we will find the source. Sometimes within seconds, definitely within minutes, we will find the absolute core source of that event. And then we either work from the core, or if the core is particularly dense, we have to pick at it from around the edges and introduce frequencies that over time, again, days, weeks, not more than that generally, will actually allow the core, the dense core, to expand. And as it expands, we take more and more off the edges. But my preference for what I like doing best is going straight to the core event, right into that which appears to be unsolvable. And that unsolvable thing then creates within us a story of why, because our brain goes, you know what people say, why is this happening to me? Why does this always, instead of going, what is the source of this issue in my being? What is it that I need to resolve and complete? What people do is they make themselves into a victim without realizing it. And for me, all victim means is they make it personal as opposed to universal. Okay, I have no judgment with any kind of wording at all. So I'm just aware that language is just a noise we make when we're trying to be understood, and everybody overlays their own meaning or understanding of a word. So sometimes it needs a little bit of explanation. So then we would either sometimes use sound. I used to be a sound healer full time, but my voice started cracking about 5 years ago. So I use inaudible sound mostly now. Sometimes guides will come in and they will literally do a kind of psychic surgery in the field. Other times it will be, there'll be, let's say there's a tumor, for instance, and sometimes what will happen is that the tumor has its own story, it has its own conversation. And so a being, an inner child will show up, and there's then a conversation with that emotional aspect. And once if you like, the misinformation that child is holding about a particular situation, that inner child, because there's not just one inner child within us, there's thousands of inner children within us. They're all us, and they're all based on decisions, ideas, or meanings that we have given our experience of life before we have the capacity to reason. So usually between 0 and 4, and then 4 and 7. So if we are going into usually a physical experience in this lifetime, it will have seeded from there. And if it isn't seeded from there, it will be coming down an ancestral line, either through the mother or the father. I have a client who I've had, who's now an incredibly good friend, been working with since 2020 on and off. And he has 2 adopted parents and a mother and an invisible father. So we have to deal with 4 energies when working with with the ancestral lines, one of which we have no confirmed history of at all. So we have to sense our way through with very strong intention. So I just want to know if I've answered the question you asked me now.
Absolutely. I think you've gone into intricate detail, and I love that you've laid down the context as well as shed more light on your very deep process and how it is built over time, lifetimes, and the multidimensional nature of the way that you're operating and the faculties that you're using. I love this feeling into someone's field, not just, I suppose, looking at it or listening to it or getting
Mm-hmm.
claircognizance about what might be going on, but viscerally experiencing that and then getting that tangible feedback from someone that they're feeling that real-time shift while you're doing the the work.
Actually, that's interesting for you to say, because I know you've had a session now, and you just said something that other people might not have gathered from what I was saying. So when I work, the person generally feels it. They physically feel a sensation, or they'll suddenly get a wave of emotion, or a memory or three will just go pop, pop, pop and disappear as we are unpacking the story around the incompleted issue.
Yeah. Yeah, or as things start to unravel. I remember when you were working on me, I just had this real, at one stage, awareness that there was something in my back heart that was, I don't know, just a bit uncomfortable that I hadn't noticed before. No, my intention was really there, and you're working on other parts, and I was, kind of feeling it, but then you named, hey, there's really something going on in your back heart, and I was like, oh my God, that's why I'm really feeling that. And that was from what I can recall, because I was half here and half not here. I was in a sort of altered state, but I do recall there being a pretty major thing that you released from there that took a week to integrate. So it was just a visceral confirmation, I suppose.
Mm, mm. So just from my interest, when you say it took a week to integrate, what did you experience over that week?
So I had, I'd say for the following 2 days, a bit of, healing crisis type thing. But I was also out of my normal environment. I was traveling and I had death of a friend and a few other things going on. So the session was sort of landing throughout all that. But I probably after 3 or 4 days felt this equilibrium that I've had before, but it just usually didn't last. And very tangibly different sense of spaciousness. And again, like I was half here and not here, but one of the things that I recall us working on was moving a lot of, let's say, people from life who don't belong in my field, as in they belong in my life, but not in my system, if that's a good way of wording it,
Mm-hmm.
out and just I suppose, yeah, just clearing the decks a little bit. And it feels quieter, like that
It's
static has been removed.
yes, understood, Sarah. So what we did was we did the first part of a 5-part process, which is Foundations for Thriving. And that exercise is literally know the difference between yourself and everyone else. So what we do in those circumstances is we scan your field, we look at where influences from society and your caregivers sit within your physical body, your cells, your field. And we then go through a process, a very specific process of clearing instantly what can be cleared away, like dusting a room. And
Mm.
then we bring in what I call first breath frequency, which is I utilize an image of the cosmos at the moment of your birth and your first breath. And then we bring that pure frequency of you in to actually replace the spaces that other beings, people, thoughts, ideas, experiences, emotions have occupied. So by the time we finish that exercise, which takes, if we do it one-on-one, it takes between an hour and a half. By the time we finish that, your field is your field, and you have your field, and your body has the mechanism now and the memory of how to recreate that which is you, as opposed to that which was cluttered up in you with everything and everyone else. And there you are. You have the perfect experience of spaciousness. Yeah.
That's fascinating, because literally we did not discuss that.
No, we didn't.
And before I got on the call, I was like, okay, I'm just going to presence myself to like, what are these shifts that I've experienced? And they are what I've shared with you. So very interesting.
And I would say that everybody that goes through, particularly on a one-on-one basis, where there is a generic version of this, but without that extra me reading through, mirroring, it's very difficult to get everything all at once. So if people do that exercise with me one-on-one, then after that they can have a generic version of it that they can do every day or every couple of days in a shorter period of time, about 10 minutes. And it's like cleaning your teeth. You're clearing your energy field. You're doing your personal housekeeping, housekeeping every day, and balancing your field. Yeah. So it's I love it. This is the first part of learning how to thrive in the world, how not to be overwhelmed, how to know the difference between that which is your thought, someone else's, especially for empaths and sensitives. Sometimes, we are so clogged up with programming events that I understand from listening to, talking to, in my own experience, that by the time we're 7, we're 95% filled up with other people and other things that are not us.
Yeah.
And there's another exercise I do with people where we take that 5% that is the remaining you, and we find out where it is in a metaphorical sphere or circle. I think I did this with you as well, actually. And then what we do is as if we are dropping a stone into a pond, we use that 5% that's you to create ripples in what is 95% not you, so that the 95% has less density from that 5% that is your true soul self. And then we work from there. So again, there are so many. I've been doing this work now for over 40 years. I can't even believe I'm saying that. Maybe more, actually, because I started doing it with animals, particularly when I was about 10. And at one point, I had a partner down in Norfolk with a bunch of kids. So if anyone has ever watched the Larkins on TV, I was absolutely Ma Larkin to a big beefy fella and 7 children, plus mine 8. And when I was down there, I ended up being asked to work with some horses at a stud farm, and ended up with an animal practice, a horse practice, and a practice for animals as well. So that was an interesting couple of years of my life as well.
Wow. Can you tell us more about the process of working with animals?
Oh, they're so easy. It's like working. Well, actually, it's the same as working with very young children. Oh, here comes the cat. It's the same as working with very young children, because they have no expectations, layers, angst or anger about the individuals that they feel might have done them wrong. They don't have a vested interest in holding on to what is ailing them. And very often the things that ail them, if they're not direct injuries, very often they will have taken on or taken off the humans that they live with, the emotional density that is too hard for them, for the humans to process. Okay. And so it's exactly the same process, but it's quicker. So I had on this particular, when I was introduced to this stud farm, this dog came up to me with a very stiff back, and he couldn't jump up onto the bales. I was sitting on straw bales. So I picked him up. He was I don't know, not a very big dog, not, you know, not a Chihuahua, not a terrier, a bit bigger, but I picked him up so I could stroke him. And as I was feeling down his back, there were little sort of like of him, little, and then all of a sudden, I put one hand at the back of his skull and another hand was running down the back, and there was this crack, and this dog yelped and leapt about 3 foot off the ground. And then he was running around the place like nothing had ever been wrong with him. So that does happen with humans sometimes, when the human understands how to deeply relax and be in presence, what some people would call surrender to the process. But again, even that word surrender has connotations. So I prefer being in presence. And when in presence, because we are in what I call 0 point, in other words, the point between that what is and that what is not, it's an area of all possibility, and the frequency has the capacity in that space of all possibility to do instant work. So with animals, they have that ability to be that present to you. Dogs are slightly different generally, because they have a different, they are trained to emotionally bond with their owners, and they have a lot of emotions themselves. So there are processes sometimes that we have to go into to what I call flatline the emotions in an animal, as we would in a human, to flatline those, remove those out, and then what I would say, allow right action to either take place on its own or set up structures around the field of the animal or the human that allows for a controlled expansion. Sometimes, you know, one session may not be enough for some things. So there are layers of things. So on average, it's around 4 sessions that for things that are quite sticky, a theme that is quite sticky. And it's the same with animals. So with horses, if they have been traumatized by the people who train them or ride them, or they have not been cared for appropriately, just like a human needs convalescence, the horse needs convalescence. What I've noticed with horses is they're very much in present time. So if they are traumatized, it's with them always. It's in present time with them. So you have to give them a time box. That's the past, that's the present, that's the future, and move them around it. So I have one story that's, there was a racehorse, a jumper actually. It was a bay, beautiful animal, who was very, very arthritic. And everyone thought they were going to have to put him down because he couldn't get around. And I just had I had a conversation with him. So I was kind of rubbing his mane and just talking to his back and various things. And I would sit in the field and I just meditate in the corner of the field. And then I went home back to London, right? Because I had 2 spaces. I was with the boyfriend in Norfolk and with my flat in London. And I came back 2 weeks later and somebody said to me, come on, I need to take you to the stud. And I said, why? And they said, you'll see. So we get in the Land Rover and we go in the stud. And there is this magnificent, beautiful horse about 2 fields away. Okay. And she said, I can't remember the name of the horse that I worked on, but let's just call him Ted, just for the sake of it. She said, would you like to see Ted? And I said, yeah, where's Ted? And she pointed down the 2 fields. And I said, how the hell did he get there? And she said, he jumped. And I said, you're kidding. So they called him back and he ran round the field twice, jumped over the fence, round the field twice, jumped over the fence, and came up to me and ate an apple. And I just thought, my God, I really can work with animals. So yeah, and a lot of, I think because I'm self-taught, or in as much as I find myself in a situation and I read the space. So I meet things, maybe not so much then, but now very much I meet life where it is, and I meet people and things exactly where they are. I don't judge them. I don't label them. I don't turn around. If someone says, oh, I have a diagnosis of bipolar, I go, aha. So you're exhibiting what type of symptoms? That's been then labeled as a psychosis or as a bipolar or as a schizophrenia, or it's been conveniently boxed and labeled. And what I find is that when we unpack the label into the symptoms, very often the symptoms begin to change, because by creating a label, putting it into a nice neat box, we create a thing, and that thing is then a problem that has to be solved. So you're constantly focused on the solving of the problem rather than the eliminating or dissolving of the symptom. So I take it back to its component parts, and then we work from there. So we meet it where it is, not where it's been told how to behave. Does that make sense? Cool.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely resonate with like labels are for clothing.
Ah,
It's a good place for them to
lovely,
be.
lovely. Yes.
And I understand, how they can be used to help classify things, to bring some kind of understanding. But ultimately, yeah, when they become just these boxes that people then hold in rigidity as part of their identities,
Yeah.
yeah, you have to question if that really serves your ultimate expansion.
I suppose if we wanted to be a warehouse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe.
Keep things in boxes up on shelves and never open the box again. And then, of course, it follows you from lifetime to lifetime because it's just incompleted information. Yeah.
Mm, mm, yeah, yeah. Maya, you found yourself in a lot of interesting situations or contexts, as you've already shared with us from the previous episodes, and finding yourself in the stud farms and various range of clients. One of the places you found yourself is a very interesting one, which is teaching people at the airport to do things that most people wouldn't think happen at airports. So, can you please tell us about your experience of working and utilizing your gifts in this context?
Yes, I can. Do you want the context of how this event came about?
I do.
Okay. So I was working for a training agency that was based down in Weybridge. And the owner of that agency was a woman called Mary Harvey, and she was the training arm for a woman called Diana Lamplugh, whose daughter, around the late 80s or 90s, had been kidnapped or something or murdered by, she was an estate agent called Susie Lamplugh. So those of us, anyone here who's my age might remember that event, because it was talked about for a while. And Diana then set up either a non-profit or a charity, I don't remember, that was designed to support safety in the workplace. And at the time, there were quite a lot of smash and grabs in banks. People were going into banks with shotguns and things and threatening the public and causing mayhem. And the Badford and Bingley in a place called Stanmore outside of northwest London was raided, and I had a direct experience of speaking with the staff at that time, and it was really obvious that there was very little support, really proper support for staff traumatized by these kind of events. And Diana was trying to set this up as the norm in companies. And Mary, the trainer boss, said to me, the person that was supposed to go with her and support her application for funding and various other things from this department and this consultation was not available, and would I go instead? So I went, oh, okay, yeah. So Diana and I clamber into a taxi, and she's telling me, so Weybridge to that part of London was then probably about a 40-minute drive. So in that 40 minutes, she gives me the rundown on where her company's going, what she's trying to achieve, why she's trying to achieve it, what she wants to talk about in the meeting and various things. So we get to where we're going, we get out, we go up these loads and loads of steps from the pavement up to the entrance of this building. And we get shepherded through this building that looked like some kind of odd 1950s. It was really interesting to go into this place where somebody comes along with a trolley to pour you tea at tea time. It was really old-fashioned, okay? And we sit down at this long table, and there's a gentleman to the right of me, Diana's to the left of me, and then various men in various states of boffinness is all I can say. You know, I mean, literally funny glasses, plaid jackets, just, you know, all of them kind of late middle age, but looking 10 years older. It was a bizarre experience. So that set the framework. And as we're talking about what Diana wants, the conversation becomes less and less about a different form of HR and care for employees, and became more and more about how to resolve trauma in people using, at the time I was a very well qualified NLP practitioner. So we were talking about that. And then we were talking about mirroring in NLP. And then they kept asking me more and more questions. And the neurology as we understand it now, and neurobiology was not known then as well. Little things were known, the structure of the brain, how things respond. But they questioned me and questioned. Diana was just sitting back and just looking bemused at what was going on. And they were questioning and questioning. And then we had a tea break. And in the tea break, and I felt quite overwhelmed, actually, and under pressure. What's going on here? These boffins en masse, about 8 of them, ran over and go, tell me about this and tell me about that. That sounds so interesting. And can you hypnotize somebody to not feel their hands? And could you influence somebody at a distance? And blah, 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 blah. And I've gone goosebumpy even talking about it. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what's going on here? They are actually interested. I'm not being attacked. Okay, which was interesting. So we sit down, and then the questions continued. And then the guy says, okay, that's that. I've got enough information now. Maya and Diana, would you leave the room for 5 minutes? So we leave the room, and Diana's looking at me and I'm looking at her and going, what is going on? And then they call us back in and he goes, right, so we've got a problem with hijacking at the moment, as you know, because this was the 90s again, there were plenty of hijackings. We've got a really big problem with hijacking, and we need to do something to improve safety. And we think that you have the ability to build us a course, a structure that will help to, in their words, assess a person's intent. So I went, oh, you mean you want me to teach people to mind read? And they went, well, we can't put it like that in the paper, in your contract. I said, a contract? And they said, yes. So we've got this budget that we need to spend. It was tens of thousands. We need to spend this. Can you do this for that money? And can you start to deliver this in 8 to 10 weeks? And we would do it as an experiment at Stansted Airport, but we have to change the law in order to have you work with it. And we would want you to work with multiple agencies in the airport. And I said, well, what do you mean by multiple agencies? And they went, the cleaning staff, the search comb staff, the security guards, the shops, everybody. Can you train everybody? And I went, no. I can train anybody, but I cannot train everybody. And they said, right, so mixed groups then. And I said, is that how you would like to proceed? So they said, so we'll fax you a contract. And I said, don't fax it to me, fax it to Mary. I couldn't manage this on my own. I'll discuss it with Mary. And they said, well, you need to let us know in 48 hours if you're going to do this. So I went back to Mary. Mary looked at the price tag, the budget. She said, if you don't do this, you're mad. So she said, we'll split this 60-40. I said, who gets the 60 and who gets the 40? She said, you get the 60. And I went, oh my God. Okay. And then I had to go away and think. So I just said, yeah, you can fax back and say that we'll do it, but we need another consultation. So that was the beginning. Now, That's the context of what happened, all right? So out of nowhere, literally, I wasn't expecting that meeting. I wouldn't have been so natural and easygoing if I had been, or honest, because I would have had too much egoic fear going on, right? Or trying to prove myself, all these various things. I mean, I was at the time, I'm just thinking back. So if my son was 8, I wouldn't have even been 30 yet. Okay, so I was in my late 20s at the time. And then the creating the course, the things that the details, running the course itself was easy, actually, because I can do that standing on my head, kicking my feet in the air. But to structure a learning manual, cassette tapes, creating binaural beats before they were even a really known thing, to deepen people's trance state, to put in layers of protection in subliminals, and working with sound engineers that luckily I knew a lot, because I used to be a singer many years ago. And to do these things, that was what was really hard. That was what was exhausting. And to do it within the period of time that I'd specified we could do it. And we had to, because they had to spend their budget within the fiscal year. So they had to have paid us. So we had to deliver in a particular time frame. Really, it needed double the time to do it in a relaxed, calm way. So that's the next piece. So first piece, how did they find you, Maya? I don't know. Second piece, how did you actually build the course and structure it off the top of my head? What happened next? So they gave me 5 groups of, I think I trained in the end just shy of 400 people. So they split them into 5 groups. And these 5 groups were everything from MI5 to we had a couple of Americans, to the staff at the airport, cleaners, search comb individuals, people that were out servicing the planes, a few police, people involved in the tactical side of anti-terrorism. So it was a really mixed bag. And what was supposed to happen, is that each group was supposed to keep quiet about what had happened in the group before, because that type of training, you need quite a lot of surprise. But because I wasn't training one group at a time, because it was a mixed group of individuals, as we did the first day, they were going back and going, this is what happened, and this is who she is, and this is da 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 da. So it turned out that with each of the 4 groups that I was training, I had to change the course. So the manual was a great leveler, because all those exercises was there. But literally, I had to come up with different exercises and different ways of working with people in order to develop their intuition, their observation skills, their capacity to work together, to be non-judgmental. I remember the first group came in and they were determined to be difficult. It was like trying to herd cats and work with errant 2-year-olds, all having temper tantrums at once. And each individual group, so the ones on the search comb didn't want to talk to the managers in the search comb, right? And the police didn't want to talk to the CIA, MI5 people. And it was very interesting to watch what was going on. And you had different levels of training in the room, and different levels of concerns. And so in the end, what I did was I said, look, you're all impossible. So you're all going to lay on the floor and learn to breathe. This is how I started it off in the very first group. So I had them, the room was enormous. So I got them in groups of 8, and I had them lay with their heads touching each other in groups of 8, like a flower. And I just said, right, we're just going to breathe. You're going to follow my words. You're going to follow my breath, and you're going to listen to what I'm saying. And as in a very neurolinguistic programming Ericksonian way, and my voice will go with you. And so we started off the course with teaching people how to be in an extremely deep, unself-aware state of being, which of course now I call presence or 0 point. And things evolve beyond, from 1990 to 2025. So I had them do this and get relaxed. and get relaxed. And then in between the relaxing, we'd eat tea and biscuits. And then I would have somebody, if someone in the room could do card tricks. So I had him do card tricks for the room. So I asked people, you know, what their party tricks were, and everyone's looking at me like I'm mad. But what I was doing was actually building some form of connection and camaraderie between all these individuals. And then we went back into the circles, and everyone's breathing. And at the end of the day, that first day, I thought, well, I haven't taught them anything, but I had, of course, but it wasn't what was on the course. And everyone was relaxed and calm and talking to each other. And so I turned around, and I had 5 days with each block of people. So I said to them, tomorrow, bring pillows and blankets. And they all looked at me, and I said, tomorrow. So then I split up the groups, and then I had them build tents, you know, with the chairs and the tables, and be under the tables and all snuggled up together and doing whatever and breathing and making noises, all with their eyes closed, laying on the floor, humming and harring and doing various things. And by the middle of that day, I realized I'd got them. I'd got them on side. And then we started to talk about how to train one's attention and focus, that individuals were in charge of their own energy. And now I realize, as I'm talking about it, this is probably the beginning of Foundations for Thriving without me realizing it, as you've taken me back. And I had to teach people to understand the difference between themselves and everyone else in the room, how to be centered in their energy. So we ended up talking about energy fields and chakras and telepathy as a concept, and beings, and I had people feeling each other's energy fields and rubbing hands, feeling the field from their hands, and all these beginner actually healing techniques and methods. And then we did a whole bunch of trust exercises, and then we did, so it sounds kind of quite ordinary, but it wasn't, because the whole time we were doing it, there was this underlying purpose of seeing how many telepaths and how many intuitives we could create from the general public in 1990, when this stuff was on the fringe of woo-woo wah-wah. So then we started working with the concepts from remote viewing as well. So we ended up with this first group loving each other to pieces, talking to each other, feeling more relaxed, happy to go home and not kick the one guy said, I can go home this weekend, not shout at the wife and not kick the dog. And I went, wow, that's a result anyway, right? If nothing else happens. So it was all an experiment. Okay, but I'm a little bit, you might have noticed, I'm quite technical. As a healer, as a therapist, I'm quite technical because I feel everything. So I don't go in like a wishy-washy, fluffy. And I'm also not going into a situation judging what is. Even then, I didn't judge what is. I met the situation as it was, and they would test me. I remember at one point we were sitting. I said to the guys, if we create a crocodile of people sitting next to each other, if we start breathing, and you're breathing out of sync, the person who is in coherence, their breathing will influence the breath of the person at the end of this, again in groups of 8. And everyone said, no, it's not possible. So in the end, they said to me, right, then you go at the end and you do the coherent breathing. So I said, okay, we'll do it that way. So everyone's doing their own breathing, and I'm doing the coherent breathing silently. And I said, after about 5 minutes, I noticed that this line had calmed down. And I said, now I'm going to hum the breath. And so you can hear it. And the one at the end said, oh my God, my breathing's exactly the pace of yours. And they all went, oh yeah. So it was the course was very experiential, no theory whatsoever. Yeah. And then they were going home at the end of each day, and they were listening to hypnosis tracks, what I would call now shamanic storytelling tracks with binaural beats and music and layers of invisible sound that were helping their brain to integrate what we had done and make sense of it. And when the groups got particularly rowdy, I would do things like I'd send them out in pairs with one of them blindfolded. and have them walk up and down the fields being led by someone else, and then come back and feedback. Gosh, I could hear everything the blindfolded person would say, and I could sense everything. And by the end of this 10-minute walk, I knew exactly where my partner was going to take me. So it was, and what was really funny is I had to modify this course, as I said a few minutes ago, for each group so that there were lots of surprises. So for me personally, it's the biggest stretch I've ever done in my life. Probably the biggest payday I ever got in my life. It cost me, I went into burnout afterwards. It was so intense. There wasn't anyone that could help me because nobody else could do what I was doing at the time, or at least there probably were, but they weren't in this country. Because, you know, California-ish, or in Asia, you would find people who could do these things, but not in the UK. And by the time we'd finished, I would say, looking back now, only the average number of people that couldn't do what we set out for was about 3 in 100. And what we found at the end of the course is that they were combat soldiers who had been in situations where they had either been wounded or they had killed. And that they couldn't, their energy field couldn't resolve that. So those individuals were put into another group and they did trauma work with other people, because at the time that wasn't what I was doing. And and I found out afterwards, because they shut the project down, they slammed the Official Secrets Act on me. But I found out from several friends about 3 years later, they were still running, that they were still walking people blindfolded around the airport and doing as much of it as they could on their own and practicing. So it was very successful. I heard it was very successful. The only thing I regret about that course is that the powers that be would not allow for there to be backup for those individuals whose psyches had been opened up. So there were 1 or 2 problems with a handful of people who, in the middle of class, ended up on the ceiling, looking, you know, having out-of-body experiences and various things like that. There wasn't a safety net for them, which was very sad, and we were cut out of the loop. But it was a very interesting, very successful project, and Stansted Airport became the airport that prevented more drug runs and less violence than any other airport in the UK. The other thing I remember is that they had massive work retention. One of the things that I remember being told was that at the time, the turnover in airports, the airport staff was very, very high. But what happened at Stansted is people stayed in place. And we also reorganized how the search cones worked and how people were promoted, because people who were very good at being in the search cone, they would then get promoted into being managers, and actually they ended up rubbish managers, because a managerial skill set is not the same as an intuitive skill set. So we got to reorganize that and help people get paid properly for their work. So I would say that's quite a successful project.
Wow, that's fascinating and so multi-layered, and amazing to hear that they're still carrying out some of the techniques to date
I know, it's amazing.
and that those really tangible results speak for themselves.
Yeah. I think it was, I mean, it really was the beginning of that remote viewing era. And I often say to people now, you know, they say, well, what were you doing? I said, well, have you seen the movie Men Who Stare at Goats? And they go, no. And I go watch that. That'll give you an idea. But we didn't do it with any drugs. There was no drug taking at all, at least on my side anyway. So I don't know what all the groups did, but I don't think that those individuals were necessarily the type that would have gone for illicit substances or even known where to find them, frankly, most of the people that were working with me. But yeah, so there we go. It was all done with mind power, emotional management, focus and presence. There we go.
That's phenomenal. Really amazing. Really amazing. And interesting the legalities that you've had to work around since, but wonderful that you can now speak about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.